Hi everyone. Today I'm going to be discussing what were you wearing, the question that women face whenever they come forward with a sexual assault case, and how clothing is never to blame for sexual assault. So my table of contents looks like it's going to be long, but I promise everything I'm going to keep it short and simple to the point. So I'm going to start off by talking about the difference between sexual harassment, assault, and abuse, then how much it happens to women, how it's not just women. I'm going to discuss briefly the sexual assault that happens amongst men, why asking the question is a victim blaming question, what happens to a victim when they are assaulted, the fight, flight, or freeze, and then what does the Bible have to say about sexual assault, why it matters to me, and so why it should matter to you, and I'm going to reveal the results of the survey that I conducted recently, and how to start the healing process for those who don't know where to start. So the difference between sexual assault and harassment and abuse. So sexual assault or sexual harassment is defined as any unwanted sexual behavior that makes someone feel upset, scared, offended, or humiliated, or is meant to make them feel that way. Sexual assault is the sexual contact or behavior that occurs without the explicit consent of the victim. Some forms of sexual assault include attempted rape, fondling, or unwanted sexual touching, or forcing a victim to perform sexual acts. Sexual abuse is referred to as molestation, and it's the act of abusive sexual behavior by one person upon another, often by using force or taking advantage of another. So if you're wondering what's the difference between sexual assault and sexual abuse, so basically the main difference is that sexual assault and sexual abuse is a term used mainly to describe sex crimes committed against minors under the age of 16 because it generally refers to an ongoing sex crime against a child for a period of time, such as a pattern of abuse. Whereas sexual assault is most often used to describe sex crimes committed against adults and more commonly used in reference to isolated acts. So how much does it happen to women? So I actually did hours and hours of research just on one statistic on how much it happens to women worldwide. And I found that women worldwide have experienced 98% of women worldwide have experienced some sort of sexual harassment, abuse, and or assault. And that can include catcalling all the way to extreme violent rape. So 98% of women worldwide. And according to RAINN, the world's largest sexual assault prevention organization, RAINN stands for Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network, 54% of female victims are between the ages of 18 and 34, 15% are 12 to 17, 28% are 35 to 64, and 3% are 65 years or older. Now notice how many women are at risk during their college years. Women ages 18 to 24 are 3 times more likely to face some sort of sexual assault if they're in college. Now, according to the NCVC, the National Center for Victims of Crime, 1 in 5 girls before the age of 16 are victims of child sex abuse, and that children are most vulnerable to child sexual assault between the ages of 7 and 13. Another thing that RAINN found is that every 68 seconds an American is sexually assaulted, and every 12 minutes that American is a child. Now, why are victims reluctant to tell authorities, you might be wondering? Well, actually, only about 23% of cases regarding sexual assault are reported to law enforcement. And even when they are reported, only 1 out of every 1,000, which is 0.8%, of cases end in the perpetrator getting incarcerated. So if you've ever wondered, well, what about false reports? Well, there's a consensus done every year by academic researchers, and recently they found that only 5% of cases are false reports. So it's not just women. Although my topic is about sexual assault amongst women and the victim blaming that we constantly face, I didn't want to shy away or exclude the fact that it does happen to men. In fact, according to RAINN, 1 out of every 10 rape victims are men. RAINN also found that men between the ages of 18 and 24 and are in college are 5 times more likely to be than non-students of the same age to be a victim of sexual assault. That's around 1 in 16 men who are in college. That means that men are more likely to be sexually assaulted than women are in college. Additionally, 1 in 6 men will be raped before the age of 18 worldwide. That's 1 in 33 American men. So that's about 3% of American men have experienced an attempted or completed rape in their lifetime. So why is asking this question such a victim-blaming question? Well, in 2019, there was a What Were You Wearing exhibit hosted at Texas A&M University. Texas A&M Today visited the exhibit and dove into the sexual violence myth where a collection of outfits hung from the walls. Jeans and t-shirts, bathing suits, uniforms, and a sequin prom dress all together illustrate stories shared by survivors about what they had on when they were sexually assaulted. The exhibit, titled What Were You Wearing, aims to shatter the myth that sexual assault can be attributed to a person's choice in wardrobe. There were 15 outfits on display. There were outfits collected from U.S. college students who not only went to law enforcement about their case, but were asked by law enforcement what they were wearing. Dr. Nancy Downing, a forensics nurse and associate professor at Texas A&M College of Nursing, says it's a powerful visual. Forensic nurses specialize in interpersonal violence, prevention, intervention, investigation, and post-trauma care, often working with people who have been sexually assaulted. And Dr. Downing says, honestly, most of the time, it's things people were wearing in their own home to be comfortable. Downing said perpetrators of sexual assault are oftentimes individuals who are known to the victim, a friend, or someone they trust. Unfortunately, victims are still blamed. Asking someone what they were wearing, even if the intent wasn't to be harmful, can still feel that way to a person who was assaulted. So if someone tells you that they were sexually assaulted in any way, the most important thing to do is just to be there for them and listen. Show them you believe them and want to help them. If they came to you for help as a Christian and a friend to them, you have been called to help them. So show them what their options are and prevent them from blaming themselves. So what happens to a victim when they are sexually assaulted? Basically, I'm going to talk about the fight, flight, or freeze, and how fast it happens. So Jim Hopper, a writer for Psychology Today, explored the difference in someone's instincts when they first encounter an assault, known as fight, flight, and freeze. According to Hopper, we have these instincts to begin with because of our brain's circuitry. The brain's defense circuitry is a network of regions that constantly scans incoming sensory information for signs of danger. Once an attack is detected or stress otherwise escalates, it can rapidly dominate brain functioning. That circuitry includes the amygdala. The amygdala is part of the lymphatic system and uses neurotransmitters to control things like fear, anxiety, and rage. The circuitry can trigger many responses in the brain and body, much more than could ever be conveyed by the phrase fight, flight, or freeze. Additionally, there's recently been found that there are 3 types of freezes. There's detection, when a victim has already been a victim before, so they're frozen because they detect it's happening again. Or 2, the second one, shocked, when the victim is so in shock that this is happening to them, or they're in shock of who's doing this to them. And the third one is no good choices, when the victim feels there's no good way to stop what is happening to them. This one applies the most to minors and children and individuals in abusive relationships. Psychology Today also found that listening carefully to people describing responses of sexual assault, severe harassment, and other things, it can be just as triggering for them to hear anything that could be victim blaming, such as asking a victim what they were wearing. So what does the Bible say about sexual assault? Deuteronomy 22:25 through 27 says, "But if in the field the man finds the girl who is engaged, and the man forces her and lies with her, then only the man who lies with her shall die. But you shall do nothing to the girl. There is no sin in the girl worthy of death. For just as a man rises against his neighbor and murders him, so is in this case. When he found her in the field, the engaged girl cried out, but there was no one to save her." So not only did the rapist in this verse receive the death penalty, but the woman was protected from all recourse. She was neither shamed nor shunned. God knew she wasn't to blame, and notice how he took action to let everyone know what happens if you take advantage of a woman. The location is significant here also. The woman was in a secluded place, alone and defenseless. She cried out, but there was no one to save her. God defends her innocence and ensures both her protection and her reputation. He shielded her from the blame for the assault and shame after it occurred. Matthew 5:27 through 30 says, "I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell." So yes, this verse may be about adultery, but the main point Jesus made was that the lustful mindset and actions of a man and how extremely harmful they can be to women. In the verse, it never once mentions what the woman might be wearing to cause these thoughts. Jesus is talking directly to any man reading this, saying, it's your thoughts and your instincts and actions that need to be blamed entirely. So I want to kind of give a little brief overview of why this matters to me so much and why I thought to send out the survey to all the women in the high school and the teachers, and why not just sexual assault, why what were you wearing? When I was 15, I was made really, really uncomfortable when I was wearing a short dress by a family friend of mine, and he ended up groping me, and I thought that it was because of what I was wearing. I blamed myself for about a year, and I thought I was the only one who thought that. I genuinely believed that no other woman had that problem or that thought, and so when my friends finally told me no, that could never have happened, it was never your fault for what you were wearing, that was when I realized I don't want any woman to ever feel that pain or that way ever, because when you blame yourself for something like that, it is so hard to get over, and I don't want any woman to ever feel like that. So why this should matter to you. Recently, with the help of Coach Sheila and Dr. Stouffer, I sent out an anonymous survey to every female student, faculty, and staff in the high school here, and the results were justifiable that the victims are never to blame and exemplified how courageous they were to answer this survey truthfully. I asked everyone 3 questions. 1, have you ever faced any kind of sexual assault, harassment, and/or abuse? 2, if you said yes to the previous question, have you ever been asked what were you wearing in connection to the harassment, assault, and/or abuse? And we'll talk about number 3 in a second, but first I'll share the results of the first 2 questions. The result of number 1 was 55% of women, which is 94 women, said no. 38.6%, which is 66 women, said yes, and 6.4%, which is 11 women, said I prefer not to say. For question 2, 59.7% of women said no, 16.5% said yes, they have been asked what they were wearing, and 23.7% said they said no to the first question. That means that out of the 66 women who said something had happened to them, 23 of them said that their outfit was put into question against their character. Now let's discuss question 3. I asked, to the best of your ability, please describe what you were wearing at the time when the sexual assault, abuse, and/or harassment or reference to the first question occurred. For this question, I had a lot of women put NA since nothing like this has ever happened to them, while I had some women list up to 3 separate outfits. Just to illustrate how many stories I had from women at the school alone, why don't you see for yourself? I typed up 80 stories. There were 66 women who said yes to the first question, yet I had 80 stories from women. I had a handful of women come to me and say that they weren't ready to talk about it, but they still gave an outfit because they were scared that the school was going to get them in trouble. They were scared of all these things. I had 3 14-year-old girls tell me that they were terrified to tell anyone, so they were terrified to submit the survey. And I said that was fine. But, yeah, so 80 stories. And these are our sisters and mothers in Christ. And for a lot of women, this was the first time they'd ever spoken out to. A lot of women were hesitant to come forward, but they showed so much courage through their pain, and they are no longer silent. And the reason I wanted to send out this survey was because I had a thought, what if a survey like this went around when I was a freshman? Because Dr. Stover asked me, is a freshman too young? And I said, absolutely not. Because if I was a freshman when this survey went around, I think that it could have made a big impact in my life. And, you know, I can never express how proud I am of every single woman who came forward and shared with me what they went through, especially those who had never shared their stories before. So how to start the healing process. Colossians 3:14 says, and over all these virtues put on love, which binds them together in perfect unity. So not only is Paul talking about, So basically, Paul is saying to do all things for the glory of God. The main idea of this verse is that as Christians and believers, we ought to demonstrate compassion, humility, and patience. When it comes to victims, we must be compassionate towards them so that we can help them stand up and speak up and not fall into the 80% of survivors who choose silence. More importantly, we as Christians must show more love so that one day everything will fall into place or a perfect unity. And then lastly, I want to close by talking about the Julie Valentine Center. If you've ever wondered, I don't know where to go, or if you've talked to your friends about what you've been through, but you don't think that's enough, I've been there. The Julie Valentine Center is a nonprofit organization here in Greenville, and it is fabulous. They do such amazing work. You can walk in any time during the day, and they're there to listen to you. No one there is a part of the legal system, the law, where they can report you. They are there purely to listen to you, not put you in the spotlight, but to help you walk to it. They want to help give you a voice and make sure that you're not sitting in that 80% of silence. They want to help you get into the 23% and hopefully increasingly more women who want to talk. And if you're not ready to go inside, that's perfectly fine. Take your time. They have an anonymous 24/7 crisis hotline. You can call any time of the day or night. And again, it's completely anonymous. They're there to listen to you. But as now we're at the end of my seminar, I hope that after hearing my data results, scriptures, and my personal connection and other sources related to my topic, you understand why asking a victim the question, what you are wearing, is purely a victim-blaming question, because it insinuates that if she wore something else, it wouldn't have happened. And that's clearly not the case if about 98% of women worldwide feel this way. Thank you.
We've got lots of panelists. I want to open it up to you all. If you have any questions or comments for Kathleen, feel free to offer those. Nobody wants to start. All right, I'll start. Kathleen, thank you, first of all. Thank you for the willingness, thank you for the courage, thank you for all of that. This is, I don't know how many times, I feel like a broken record, I don't know how many times these projects, the theme that comes to mind is that proximity breeds empathy, right? If you find yourself in a situation and not being concerned, hear me, if you find yourself in a situation not being concerned about something like this, it's probably because you're one of the fortunate ones that this hasn't really hit close to home, and you're blessed in that regard. But proximity breeds empathy, and as Christians, like Kathleen said, as Christians, it's not an option to not care when other people are hurting. It's just not an option. And I don't mean to turn this into any more of a lesson than it already has. What has been said is more than sufficient, but I just want to publicly say thank you and appreciate all of that stuff. Question for you: is there any? I was curious about this. I didn't see this in your paper either.
What?
The three three categories that you mentioned: harassment, assault and abuse. What are the statistical differences between those three groups?
I would say that definitely harassment is the biggest one.
Sure.
Because, yeah, it's 98%, but I honestly can't name a single woman in my life who has never faced any kind of sexual harassment, because that does include catcalling, uncomfortable touching, that includes verbal harassment too. I didn't know, so I didn't say physical.
Yeah.
So I think that harassment definitely would probably be the biggest one, but assault is taken more seriously, right. And same with just
sure.
abuse.
Yeah. More curiosity than anything, but yeah, that's fascinating to me. Anecdote, if you don't mind, because I want to speak to my guys in here, because this is one of those things that if you're not careful, so most of you are polite enough to not let your eyes roll on this particular situation, but in this given context, some of y'all aren't brave enough to let your eyes roll on this particular topic. But I know the temptation to, how do I say this fairly, to wonder how big of a deal this really is. Last year, I had a couple of ladies do similar projects, and I went home and I shared this with my wife. I'm one of those guys, I go home and I spill my day to my wife, and she's more than kind to me to listen. And it's heavy. I know it's heavy to listen to this, and then, you know, how do you deal with it? How do you process it? And one of the ladies last year, one of my students last year, they explained how they had one of those teachers, quote unquote, just a male teacher, old guy, not giving off really positive vibes to begin with, but turns out ended up being a real creep. And had taught at that school for some years or whatever. This wasn't Southside, this was a different school, different situation. I'll spare you the details. My comment to my wife was, I don't remember ever having a teacher like that. And her comment to me was, that you know of. Because I was privileged to not have to worry about that. Proximity breeds empathy. The anger that rises up in you when something like this happens to someone you love, that's when you start caring.
Yeah, I've had a teacher like that
Yeah.
too.
So as a husband, as a father, as a teacher, yeah, you'll forgive me if I get my feelings about it. I'm just saying to all my guys out there, you're privileged if you don't think that this is as big of a deal as it is. Right? And that's all I have to say about that. Anybody else have anything?
Why do you think, your best guess,
Mhm.
'cause I'm gonna look at law enforcement officers, like, I'm gonna give law enforcement officers benefit of the doubt and just say they're not trying to cause further harm for these girls.
By asking the question.
By asking a question, what do you think's behind that question?
Well, you know, I'll be honest, I didn't share this in my personal thing, but I was also like sexually assaulted last year, and when I came forward to police, I was asked by a male police officer what I was wearing.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of set me into a state of shock, and it put more blame on myself, but then I had to remember like, no, because you look at the exhibit I showed of all these women and men of stuff they were wearing, and like one of the outfits I listed was a sequin prom dress, bathing suits, sweatshirts. And majority of the outfits that the women at this school came forward said that they were wearing were jeans and a t-shirt. It really can be any outfit. So yeah, I understand, I get it when you're asking for logistical reasons the question, but I don't see a reason to ask it. I don't really understand.
Second question,
Mhm.
what would you say, because the harassment statistic is insane
Mhm.
and infuriating, what would you say to guys who would say, I joke around and it's just funny and I don't mean anything by it?
It's not funny. I don't know why you're joking around like that. Like, you're joking around at, like, saying, like, what a woman's wearing. Is that what you're saying? Then,
Catcalling in the hallways, for example.
why did that thought come into your mind? Why did you have to say it out loud? You should be blaming it on your thoughts entirely. What a woman, for example, a lot of people in this room can testify, I dress how I want every day to school. I try to dress very well every day because of what I want to wear. But I have gotten comments, like I go to work every single day after school. I have gotten comments from male shoppers, male customers, but I don't let that affect me because that is what I want to wear. I'm not wearing it for the intent to look good for a man. I'm wearing it for myself. And if a man can't control his thoughts, that's on him.
I'll say, yeah, I've had conversations and hearing secondhand of, for our middle school, for example, boys barking at girls.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
And I know middle school boys, their brain is not thinking.
I've had
this
some
is-
middle school girls ask me why I didn't send them the survey, and I said I was worried about sending that to middle school girls.
Yeah. Regardless, I know middle school boys, they're in a category of idiocy that transcends even awareness of what sexual harassment is, right? Like that. What would you say, or what would your ask be to guys
In
who
middle
are
school?
specifically going into college, who are watching it, who watch it happen?
like, what do I say to the guys who
What
are
would-
watching women being harassed?
Yeah, who are like present in the conversation or in the car or in the class.
Tell them that's not cool what you just said. Like, saying that's not cool, I feel like is a phrase that a lot of high school boys could, like, say to their friends so that they'll listen to them. Because I feel like adults, you can say, like, hey, that's not respectful, that's not right. Whereas if you say to your friends, like, hey, that's just not cool, like, don't do that. Notice how that made that woman feel. Then maybe that could change their perception.
My last question.
Mhm.
0 great answers. In your research, was there any, I don't know, I'm a dad of 2 girls. In your research, was there any proactive things women or young men could do to help protect themselves?
Help protect themselves?
Yeah.
Like how to stop from not getting
Yeah,
harassed
to
or.
proactively beforehand.
That's the
And
thing.
not harassment, like harassment I get.
That's,
Like it can happen as you're walking down the street.
that's the thing. That's the saddest part about it is you can't. The only way that it happens because of someone else hurting you. You can't stop. Like, for example, like I was saying, I try to dress cute relatively every day. That's not gonna, like how I dress. If a man looks at me and he thinks a certain way, that's not, like he has that like thought, but he can control if he says something.
For sure. I'm not even talking about dress code.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
dress at this point. I'm
Yeah.
thinking broadly.
I'm just saying I don't think there
holistically.
is a way that we can, I don't know if there is a way right now we can stop it entirely, but because especially since the percentage is 98% and that's not gonna go down anytime soon, but what can minimize is the 80 stories I receive from women here, those amount of stories can go down if more people stop having those instincts and they stop having that need to act on those women just dressing how they want to or just standing there just being women or stuff like that. But yeah, sadly I don't think there is a way to really prepare for that.
Ladies, any questions or comments? I don't know, I'm trying to read the room well, and I wanna be sensitive to the topic, and it's one of those things where sometimes the best decision on what to say is just to know when not to say anything else. So, other than that, Kathleen,